This is just a simple film analysis of a film called The Battle of Algiers. This film was directed by an Italian director called Giro Pontecorvo. Enjoy. The oppressed in this film became aware of the conditions when Algeria, the whole country, and also Algiers, the capital of Algeria, became like, I suppose, an army base. The French troopers were everywhere. They were controlling the place like they're controlling rats. Every single place where Algerians were staying and walking past, it was simply stop and frisk. There were gates everywhere. You have to walk with your ID. They end up realizing that the condition that we live in is toxic. There is one scene in the film of this old man who has sat down and is eating a sandwich. The police were searching for the killers of a policeman. Actually, not the police. The army was searching for the killer of a policeman. This old man clearly is an Algerian, but simply because he's Algerian, the locals looks at this old man and judge him to be a terrorist. Basically, they project an action that happened that somebody did, and they project that action on this old man. They blame the old man for something that he didn't do simply because he's Algerian, simply because he's Arabic, as a very popular curse word they're calling them in the film, dirty Arab. Another thing that people in Algerians end up realizing they're living under is this condition of constant torture. If you get captured by the troops and they want to get information from you, they will torture you to get the information. They will use every single torture system to get the information, and the public, the Algerian public, knew this because the news was reporting this, as the film indicates. And that's another way of people realizing the condition they're living in. Most of the people that were being tortured were mainly members of FLN, and anyone who was somehow associated with FLN, and sometimes they torture them until the point where they just can't even function properly. In the film, a group called the FLN that's causing so much, I suppose, terror around Algiers, decided that for us to gain independence in Algeria is for us to have 1 week of strike. Everyone who's working should stop working for at least 1 week. The people of Algeria strongly supported this decision because it's a very democratic thing to do, to have a strike whenever you don't like something. The strike was also to get the UN to be in favor of the FLN, to sort of like promote themselves as democratic and well-behaved group, and to present the French army as these terrorists who are destroying defenseless people. So this strike was political on the FLN side. FLN only wanted one thing, and that is independence. They wanted the French out of Algeria. The result ended up being that the troops became extremely, upset at this strike. It's simply something the people are doing, but the army, the French army, were against it, and which resulted the French army literally going in their houses with guns, shooting guns and everywhere. If you're in a house, they kick you out. They put you in a van and they drive you back to a factory that you work at. There are scenes where the shop owners are literally being forced to go back in the shops and work. These shop owners are forced to open the shops that they decided to have a strike, but the army is against it. The army been against it, and if they know that you own a shop, they will literally grab you and kick you in the shop, slap you, and push you in the shop to start working. There's one very interesting scene of this kid that's telling everyone that don't worry, the FLN will avenge you. We're the good guys, I suppose. So the FLN became the saviors, the fighters of the democracies, the fighters of the freedom, because the French army was literally, because of these such a harsh reactions, these harsh violences toward the people of Algeria, the French people became the villain, and the FLN, even though the FLN was using such a harsh violence with explosives and guns and shooting people, but because of the reaction that the French army was having, not on the FLN, but even on the civilians, the FLN end up becoming the heroes of the civilians. The FLN end up becoming the heroes of the Algerians. There is no way the Battle of Algiers can be compared to the first cinema, because the first cinema of the 1920s and 1960s were a decade of established mass entertainment, established studio system that produce and distribute films like a factory, with actors, directors, and writers on a long-term contract. Producing films that falls in the category of something I would call escapism. Film that usually end up with a happy ending, stories about the upper class American families, and most of them stories featured males as heroes fighting crimes in various genre of films, and features films as house mothers, or as the princesses, a damsel in distress. Films like The Jazz Singer, The Big Parade, The Thief of Bangladesh, and so on and so forth. These films were simply to entertain the mass. But this film is extremely different from the first cinema of Hollywood, classical Hollywood films, because it features women as heroes fighting for the independence of Algeria. We see that there are three women who want to gain independence in their country, and they're willing to die for their country as well. These women are willing to put bombs in their bags, walk across security, and they plant these bombs in one scene. We have one of them planting the bombs in a disco bar, one of them in a big mall, one of them I believe in a dense place. It looks like a pub. It looks like a place where you go and get drink, socialized place, because they hated the French and they want the French to move out of Algeria. And another reason was this action was actually a reaction to a bomb one of the French army guy planted outside a house of Algerians that blew up. And this reaction ended up becoming that, okay, we'll now plant 3 bombs. You guys do 1, we do 3. So for the sake of nationalism, for the sake of independence, these women were willing to die, were willing to do something I personally would call insane. But the fact that this film features women as heroes, for people fighting for a greater cause, is the reason why I personally cannot compare this film to any you know classical studio-based first cinema films. This film can be compared to second cinema. This film has strong element of second cinema in it. The filming style of Italian neorealism, the French New Wave, like The Bicycle Thief, Roman Open City, The 400 Blows comes to mind when watching this film because of the documentary filming style, shooting on location, the theme being about social issues, using non-professional actors. One of the main actors in this film, Alila Point, was played by a non-professional actor called Brahim Hagin. And the leader of the FLN, Jafar, was played by Saeed Isaf, in which in real life he was a member of the FLN who conducted the bombings around Algiers. This role was simply him not acting but reacting to what happened in his life. All extras were Algerians who experienced the same thing during the War of Independence between Algeria and the French, the same war that this film is based on. The director Gillo Pontecorvo really wanted his actors to fit in with the environment, to look and act and sound very realistic. He is obsessed with realism, and this film he wanted to show a strong resemblance of realism. So whenever he was picking someone to play the character Colonel Mathieu, one person was suggested, which was Jean Martin. He was arguing with this suggestion because Jean Martin was once a theater actor, but Jean Martin was fired from theater acting because he signed a form that was against the Algerian war. Jean Martin was also a veteran. He had served in a paratroop regiment during the Indonesia War, and he had taken part in the French resistance. So whenever Gino Pantakov decided to work with him, he looked at his history, and he ended up realizing that I can take so much inspiration from Martin, because Martin has been a paratroop before. So whenever Martin was playing the character of Colonel Mathieu, he was just portraying his autobiographic life, because this is something he has experienced before. He was an army man before. One great example of a second cinema element, if I say the French New Wave, is the strong use of mise en scène. We see this whenever the bombing goes off in a building or in a mall. It's all in a wide shot. There's not a single cut. The bombing goes on. We see just buildings falling down, bodies falling down, people running and crying, and there's this strong element of realism in it, a strong element of this newsreel in it. It's as if you're watching a documentary. It's as if you're watching something that's happening right in front of you, and it's very traumatic. Other element of the French New Wave uses wide shot and then goes to close-up shot by showing human faces, human emotions. This element is seen a lot in French New Wave films. This is the reason why this film can be compared to a second cinema. This film is in a way a second cinema because of these elements. And using children in the films, Rome Open City, The Bicycle Thieves, even The 400 Blows, both have children in it that are playing very important roles, very realistic roles. And in this film, The Battle of Algiers, we have one child who also plays an important role of sending a message and also of motivating Algerians. This film can also be put in the category of third cinema. I suppose this film can also be regarded as a third cinema film because it is extremely anti-colonialism, and it's also a political film that's putting a message out there. Third cinema were a Latin American film movement that started in the 1960s, 1970s, which was extremely against capitalism and the film movement that started when colonialism ended, and a lot of the films was about the evil of colonialism. This film is about anti-colonialism. This film simply tells a story about Algerians that want the French who are colonizing them to go back to France, to go away. They want to end colonialism. So in a way, third cinemas were usually political cinemas, political films that were against the people that were ruling them, against systems that was destroying them, destroying the people, I suppose we should say. And this film is just that, because most third cinema films are usually banned in certain countries. This film was banned for 5 years in France when it was released. That says something about it. In a way, the Battle of Algiers shares element from second cinema and third cinema. It's amazing knowing this. It's one of the reasons why watching this film as a film student is a great treasure, because you learn so much from it. You get a bit from different places. So I guess that the last question is, how was history represented in this film? Well, the film showed us that when a bomb was blown up at the Casbah, Algerian women disguised themselves as French women. They walked through the checkpoint and they put bombs in their bags and in the basket, I suppose, and blew up through areas. This film shows them women as educated and some more of middle class women, but in reality, these women were from the rural area of Algeria, and a lot of them were illiterate. So on one side, the film shows a true fact that women played a part in fighting for independence, but another part it wasn't factual because the women were much more of middle class women. Another strong thing that happened in Algeria for the fight of independence was that the French took some Algerians and made them fight for them. The Algerians that were fighting for the French were called the Harkis, and a lot of Harkis were actually killed when at the end of the War of Independence, and when Algeria got its independence, a lot of Harkis were killed. But this film did not show any Harkis at all. Another thing that happened in Algeria for the fight of the Algerian independence was the Communist Party in Algeria were the ones who supplied bombers for the FLN, and the Communist Party was the one that had experts who knew how to create explosives, but the Communist Party was nowhere to be found or seen in this film. Another factual thing that happened in Algeria was that a lot of wars were actually fought on the mountains, on the countryside. It was like a guerrilla warfare. But the Battle of Algiers mainly take place in Algiers. A lot of sequences, actions were all in Algeria, were all in the capital. And I don't know why the director just set this whole movie in one place. But I would have loved if he had, certain areas showing the French versus Algerians fighting, guerrilla style out in the countryside, out in on the mountains, and to show the actual rural areas where many Algerians, many Muslim Algerians were living. A lot of that wasn't been seen in the film, and that was a bit disappointed because it could have added so much more. Another thing that this film recreated history in a way was that Colonel Mathieu, the one who was played by the actor Jean Martin, is actually a fictitious character. It seems like this film took two generals and just add them all together and created one character who became Colonel Mathieu. Uh, Colonel Mathieu in this film was mostly based on two military leaders. That's one leader was called General Jacques Massou and Colonel Marcel Bigard. In history, you have two French generals and colonels fighting for the French to stay in Algeria, and in the film we only have one person, one army person, Colonel Mathieu, fighting for the French to stay in Algeria. I don't know why this film couldn't stick to the fact. Yeah. Okay, I would advise any film student or any film enthusiastic person to watch this film. Another thing about this film is that the Black Panther used this film to train black people in America for how to fight the CIA and so on. This film was also used by Americans, to fight people in Iraq and Afghanistan. This film was also used by ISIS as well, ISIS members. It said that, but I'm not sure, but it said. So this film is used by both good guys and bad guys to fight each other. And you can guess which one is a good guy, and you can guess who's the bad guy. That's obviously, but it just tells you that this film it's a masterpiece. It's amazing, and everyone should watch it.